Thing of the future, AI systems in workplaces which use emotion recognition will be banned in the EU under legislation passed by the European Parliament today. It's part of a set of new regulations for AI which have been hailed as the world's first major effort to set guardrails on the technology. Emily Taylor is Chief Executive of Oxford Information Labs and an Associate Fellow at the International Cybersecurity Programme at Chatham House. She's been studying the legislation and joins me now. Emily, welcome back to the programme. I think you've been with us before. Explain what's happening here and why it is significant.
This is the first major piece of legislation about AI from a major economic bloc, the European Union. I mean, the European Union has been really on the front foot in regulating technology over the last decade. But this really is trying to put those guardrails in place. Everybody is talking out about AI, as you mentioned, Mariella, but it's very difficult to really sort of understand how to cope with it. It's here. It's completing your sentences in your text messages and your emails, and it can also offer incredible benefits to society, but there are clearly ethical and societal harms that could arise from the use of such a powerful technology, and that's what the EU is trying to put guardrails around.
So let's look at some of the sort of danger areas, if you will. What is emotion recognition when applied to AI?
Yeah, I was wondering about that, and I don't know if you've been doing video conferencing calls like many people in business over the last few years, but I've noticed over the last few months that, you're on calls and suddenly you get all these balloons coming up or thumbs up from people who don't know that they're sending any sort of intervention into the conversation. It can be really off-putting, and you do wonder, are we also going to get the kind of my boss is an idiot, I'm secretly doing my emails while pretending to concentrate type emojis? And this is, I guess, the sort of the unwitting signals that we don't think we're sending, but AI has the capability from facial recognition and those sort of technologies of picking up and transmitting to others.
And is that the only area in which you worry about it? The EU's approach is based on assessment of risk. I wonder, what the greatest risks you think are that need to be addressed.
Well, the EU's approach, I think, fundamentally has to be the right one, which is a risk-based approach, and there are three categories of risk that they articulate. One is unacceptable risk that we've just been talking about. That's kind of banned. Then there's, at the other end of the scale, there's low risk, where you have very light touch regulation, and in the middle is a great big difficult area, which is the high risk, and that affects things like education, employment, critical infrastructure, migration. And before you're allowed to put products or services on the market in the EU, under the new regulation, you're going to have a whole load of compliance and red tape in place. Now, one of the things that the EU is doing in this regulation is closely coupling with technical standards and saying if you comply with European standards on AI, then there's a presumption that you will be compliant. But we've been doing some work in that area, and we're quite worried about how that's going to play out in practice. It's a complex area, and I think that the assumptions that the Commission seems to have, that standards coming from European standards bodies that happen to just be geographically placed in Europe but are actually global in nature. So Huawei, for example, is a founder member of the AI security group in a European standards body called ETSI. So if you assume that everything coming out of that will comply with European values, I think that is a wrong assumption.
Indeed. So it's a start, but we're not quite there yet, I think is pretty much what you're saying. Yeah.
Exactly. I think, regulation clearly has a place as these game-changing technologies affect our society, and it's bound to not get it right the first time. The EU is really marking its territory as the world's regulator, and and I think a big question mark is what impact will it have on the EU's innovation sectors?
Thank you very much. Really interesting. And we'd love to have you back to unpick this even further in the near future. That was Emily Taylor from the International Cybersecurity Programme at Chatham House.